That was not as satisfying as I was hoping. And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. I'm excited about this one. I'm excited about this one because I don't even fucking know why. Just because I can be, I guess. I woke up this morning and I was feeling really good. Got some exercise in, went for an early morning walk before the sun was up. It was kind of nice. It's a warm day. Yesterday was kind of fucking frigid. Yeah, I don't know. Little simple reasons to just kind of go, this is dope. But it's funny, I think, because the only reason I can really enjoy them and they can have that much influence on how I'm doing is because I'm not thinking about the rest of the day. I'm not thinking about what's going to happen later. I'm more or less just invested in the experience that I'm having from moment to moment to moment. And so this has been a very full morning for me, despite only getting work done here at home, listening to some music and chilling out with my cat. It's been a very fulfilling morning for me. That said, I have an exciting announcement. Well, we have an exciting announcement. We'll get to it shortly. I'm going to pass this over to Andrew first because I just ranted for a bit.
I'm getting live on TikTok real quick. I kind of forgot to do that.
I have impeccable timing. While he's busy, I'll pass it to him.
Yeah. But like as soon as someone puts a bite of food in their mouth, oh yeah, what was that? Yeah, you wanted to talk about shit. But yeah, actually, kind of something a little bit similar was hitting me this morning. Just how like sometimes I'll assume I'm feeling a certain way, and like that's not great. Like on the side of positive, negative, whatever assumption you want to make, and then I'm like, wait a second, I'm the one doing that. Like I'm the root of my experience, and so much to your point of what gets in the way of us being able to fully enjoy whatever we're doing or at least appreciate it is the thoughts about what's next, what's to come, like further down in the day. And it was hitting me like how often I would maintain that and just like how much weight there is added on top of that. And it's almost like you were actually using and shit. I can't remember if this was in a call yesterday or in the episode that I just got done editing, season 5, episode 19 with Jackie and Amanda. It's fucking epic. So that should be out certainly by this afternoon once we get through our calls. But the example you were giving was holding on to weight and how it's like on both sides of, like a barbell or something, holding it above you. And you're saying it with weights on each side, but I was almost thinking just now about how, the further along you think about either the past or the future or whatever, the more forward looking, whether it's, 5-10 year plan or assumptions or fears about how that's going to play out down the road. It's like the bar extends. And so the longer the bar is, the more weight it's going to be. And then you extend out, like a year or two. It's like, that's a really long fucking bar. You extend out to the end of the day. That's a decent length bar, because there's an infinite amount of moments to be experienced in between right now and in, 2 hours even. And so as that focus gets too focused on that, but even as I'm saying that, like I could imagine a time in my life where I thought, oh, not considering what's going to happen in 2 hours, that's irresponsible to do that, to like not be like super well planned for everything to come. That's funny. I have not thought about that. Like responsibility that I was kind of taught was being responsible for myself, like having a big savings account, like having a plan for how your year is going to go, scheduling out everything. Holy fuck. That's so much of the definition of responsibility that I had growing up. Like I did not realize how much it was plan. And I see that that's all around us all the time. We think of that being responsibility, like having everything set up and planned for and safety net after safety net after safety net. That's being responsible. And it's like entirely focused on yourself and it's entirely missing the reality of being responsible, which is just paying attention to where you're at, like fully experiencing the experience that you're having. And with that comes far less weight. And that's why there's almost this, and that's why the word responsibility is almost always felt really heavy to me too. Because it's not that it's not, but it's different. paying attention to where you're at and not being so caught up in yourself is a different type of experience, but it's not heavy. And so, like, the word has always felt heavy because it's always been, and I didn't even realize that it's always been about having things set up and planned for and secured and as certain as you can possibly make everything going on is the ultimate way to be responsible. Like, literally, the extreme of responsibility in that definition is knowing everything about how your life's gonna go and being sure of it. Like, that was responsibility. That's fucked. That's fucking wild.
Yeah, it's funny how often things that we're taught go back to control, right? Like it's kind of like respect. We think that respect is something that we have to go out and get, or something that will happen once we've done enough things, once we're perceived a certain way by other people. And so it's something that becomes a pursuit to be respectable, to get people's respect. And the reality of respect is living for yourself, is actually having people genuinely look at you and go, you don't give a fuck if I'm judging you, do you? Like, you make choices for yourself, you think about them, you do it, you don't look to the next person. Like, there's respect, the reality, and then there's respect, the illusion. People looking up to you, you being an authority. I mean, how many times were we told as children, respect your parents, respect your elders? That sounds a lot like obey. I don't know, that doesn't sound like respect. That sounds like obey. And it's that. It just got tied up in control. Things often do.
And it's another way that we rely upon that false certainty. Like, I've been getting some clips out of our infidelity community topics episode number 39, and how much that, oh fuck, where'd that go? Hold on. Relationships, parents, respect. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with the infidelity thing, but it reminded me with the respect thing, with respecting your elders, like how much certainty that, and it's like certainty in the sense, or control in the sense that regardless of my actions as an elder, you just respect it because I'm an elder. And it's kind of like it's with relationships, like the certainty that we try and have with a long-term relationship, like thinking that, the whole farce till death do us part, that whole idea is inevitably gonna create some like curated experience that's resistant to the flow of reality. And so respecting your elders is kind of like, let us keep believing the shit that we believe and hold on to and are so sure of because it makes us comfortable. Don't make me uncomfortable, you little twerp teenager, for saying something that actually does make me question something, but I'm an elder, so that's disrespectful to talk in that way or to say that thing. And it's just another way to reinforce that control. And then so it isn't, because holy fuck, because like kids and teenagers still haven't been, you know, quite beaten over the head with like the certainty, the false certainty over and over, the ideas of control. And so that movement from being a child and like basically being in a dream and then feeling like you can be sure of things and know things, and that dream getting more and more rigid and certain and sure. And so the ones who are closer to uncertainty are younger kids, are children. So with younger children, we're like, oh, they're just, being a child, and we write that off because we have a label of that, as opposed to that is reality expressing itself. That is reality expressing intelligence. And then once it moves beyond the child years, then it's like teenagers that are, they start going through their own sort of evolutions with puberty and whatnot. And then it's like, it transitions to respect your elders, as opposed to, oh, they're just a child, so we write them off like that. It's like, oh, you're just a kid, you're younger than me, respect your elders. And it comes from those roles and that desire to like be able to maintain your certainty in a lot of ways, that keeps getting more and more reinforced and dug into the older we get, typically.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a number of people in the audience right now. So, hello. everyone. I figured this is a good opportunity to segue. I got really excited there into the announcement that I mentioned earlier. We've decided to do a contest. We've decided to do a viral video contest, and I know that sounds vague and ambiguous because more or less it is. We would like you to make a video about Dualistic Unity, about your experience with Dualistic Unity, or you can just take a clip of the podcast itself and make a video out of that. But we're going to give you until the end of February, and whichever video has the most traffic, generates the most buzz, has the most views, the person who made that video is going to win a free ticket to our California mini retreat.
Sorry, lost the tab. I was checking the how many people we had watching on different platforms because I'm in the I don't get to see that part anymore. But yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun, and I may be able to do some sort of like mini workshop or something, just like talking about some social media thoughts, strategies I've been posting for a long time, and like I actually wanted to maybe we can talk. Hold on. Yeah, no, we're good. Just with virality. Let's get into it. I don't know why I thought about it funny. But anyway.
Pay attention, everybody. These are the secrets to viral videos. Yeah. This is why we got to keep it hush hush. Shh, lean in close now. Lean in close.
No, and so this is funny because I know how to, or like not know for sure, but like there's some strategies out there to like manipulate a video into going viral, and like I don't do it as much anymore, and it's like been a part of my willingness to relax a little more, like be myself a little bit more, and like it just started to be a kind of funny feeling when I would post those types of videos because there was that feeling of control in it. Like I know how to do this, and it's not to say that it doesn't maybe help, but there is also the assumption that it's what's best, and like this is what's best. And it hit me. I was actually talking with a friend yesterday about some social media stuff and how part of me, and not that it's not cool that my accounts grew a lot in a short amount of time, but part of me looking at that, like I had this assumption that it was better, but the reality of it is that with growth like that, typically it's better, slower, longer term because it's not just one video. Like when that happened, it was two videos on Instagram specifically, went from like 30,000 to like 150,000 followers in like a month or two. And it was two videos went super viral at the same time. And they had that sort of blueprint in there. It was like, hook, call to action, feel free to toss me a follow, blah, blah, blah. It was like they were quote unquote perfectly set up. And this is funny because I'm kind of talking through this as I'm realizing how much. And it's not to say that like, there's no regrets with it at all, but like that thinking in that moment, like that's the best way to make a video. That's the best way to do things. It's like a lot of people followed me from two videos as opposed to slower growth, longer term. People usually see a few videos or like one will catch their attention and then it's like they see a few more, and they get more of a fuller picture. And so that's part of the reason why now I'll like post on my story or say things like, if you're not like, if you see my videos and just swipe on by or like don't really care about it, like don't feel like you're doing me a disservice by unfollowing me, because it actually would be awesome if you did. If you're not interested in the videos, if you are, on the edge, or you like some and don't like others, or don't like when I talk about substances or religion or whatever, like you're not doing me a service by continuing to follow, because then if most of your videos get shown to people who follow you first and they're not, all in on what you're saying, then they're going to swipe by, and then it's going to like videos aren't going to do. as well. So this is very much just like me talking out social media strategy type stuff, but realizing how much that period where I went, and on TikTok, it was like, 600,000 followers to a million in like the same sort of, a few months. And like, that wasn't necessarily what was best. Like, at all. And to say that is kind of funny because most people are like, want to gain more followers, even within just not, I'm not even talking about what's best for my life. I'm just talking about what's best within the little tiny world of social media, because it's not about the number of people that are there. It's, engagement and whatnot. And so if you do curate things in that way, as opposed to just continuing to share yourself and continuing to express things closer to authentically, then as you authentically shift to different things you're interested in, then that there isn't going to be as jarring of a difference, because you were trying to curate things a little bit more, and then you stopped curating things a little bit more, and because there was less, and again, it was still, you're always being authentic, you're always being yourself, but there was, because I instilled more of a mechanism of control versus sharing things more authentically without the viral blueprint type shit that I was using for a while, then there is more of a depth to that, I think, as opposed to just this, I guess, shallowness to it, just lack of authenticity, more desire for control, more thinking like this is what's best and I know that, and so I'm going to do things because of that. So yeah, that's interesting. So anyway, full circle back to the viral video contest. Looking forward to that. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm definitely down. If anyone has questions, even just shoot me messages about thoughts about making videos and whatnot. Happy to answer them.
Yeah, I'm excited because I know a lot of people out there have a lot of episodes that they've enjoyed. They have moments that they went, yeah, that shit. And this gives them an opportunity to go and capitalize on that in whatever way they want. And more importantly, it involves people doing it without any input from us or anyone else. And there's this awesome reward in that you get to come and fucking hang with us at the end of it. And of course, we really appreciate it. So yeah, do that. Whatever video you can make, hashtag Dualistic Unity, tag Dualistic Unity, tag Andrew and myself if you can. He is not Andrew Murnane, and I am Transcending Me on TikTok, or Coalition for You on Instagram. I know it's confusing, but I still stand by that Instagram handle.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so that'll be that'll be a lot of fun. Sometimes I've forgotten like which one it is on which platform, so I'll type in like Coalition for You on TikTok. But yeah, we get there. There's only one other option, so it's not that difficult. But something we were talking about before we got on here, which I said we should kick things off with that, and then obviously we didn't. We got into some other stuff, but was the idea of what's healthy. And we did a full community topics on healthy living. It's in the 30s, maybe. It was a good one, and we covered like a lot of different aspects of quote unquote health. And I think it was like an hour, so one of the longer community topics. But just in regards to like defining healthy, and I'm sure we actually, now that I'm realizing we did a full community topics on that, I'm sure we got into that and whatnot, but it's like it's as subjective as any other words. Like it's as subjective as anything else that you say, like to your experience. Like what's healthy for you may not be healthy for me. What's healthy for me may not be healthy for someone else. And so I've been posting more videos just about cannabis and whatnot. And it's funny how I was saying this before, like how even just saying cannabis is healthy. Like a lot of people are going to get riled up about that. Like to say that something like that is healthy, but it's because it's subjective, it depends on your experience. And it does, it's so much of it, and so many of the comments that I get, it just like comes down to responsibility, and people don't want to take responsibility. So cannabis just kind of like amplifies whatever you're doing. So if you're lazy, irresponsible, whatever, like you're going to be lazier and less responsible with cannabis. But if you're, doing stuff, active, doing whatever, like it amplifies that. And it's funny how people don't want to look at that. And so because it's been labeled an illegal drug for so long, like to say that it's healthy, people, there's going to be an aversion to it. But because health is subjective, it depends. Like for me, cannabis, I would definitely say is healthy. Like I deal with discomforts and don't feel as certain about things, obviously, and that's always the case. But like I definitely, like when I'm sober, I can feel a little bit more in control. And if that's the world that you're coming from, that ultimate control is the best thing, then being able to feel like you don't have quite so much control, not being able to be so certain about yourself or how you're doing, and just being a little bit more relaxed, like that's way fucking healthier. So like it's just funny how we want to use blanket statements for things, like for fucking everything we want to define it. And so, and it's same for food, same for anything. Like if you have an allergy to a food that's a quote unquote health food, like that's not going to be healthy to you. You're going to have a response that isn't going to be super enjoyable, for someone who's super clean all the time and like washes their hand as kind of a germaphobe. Like mixing in some dirt to their life is healthier because their immune system's going to be fucked if they're not allowing it to do things all the time. But like we would never think is being a little bit sicker would be healthier, kind of like getting a flu shot gives you a little bit of the flu, so you're able to build some antibodies against it and fight it. But at the same time, it's like, how much are you relying upon that then versus your own body being able to handle it and fight it? So we actually do things that are purposefully unhealthy from a perspective in order to long term be healthier, or like, just in the example of sickness. And so health is always in flux. Like it's always subjective. It's always going to be day to day, moment to moment. Like sometimes getting more sleep is healthier. Sometimes getting less sleep is healthier, depending on what you're doing with the rest of your day and what you're doing with your entire life. Like there's not like this fucking for everything. Holy shit. Like for everything, there's no objective. But we have, oh my gosh, we've made a world that is, you know, as objective as we can make it, as certain as we can make it, as sure as we can make it. Just do this, this, this. Like we've broken days up into 8-hour periods, basically, because that's the right way. And so sleep 7 to 8, 7 to 9 hours, whatever is what's best. And like, yeah, some people maybe need some more sleep. Some people don't need as much sleep, but it comes down to you. And if you don't want to take responsibility for even, you know, testing that out without so many assumptions, then you're just going to look to what everyone else is doing. And that goes for everything.
Yeah, we just want things to be neat, tidy, and structured. That's all we want. We just want things to be easy to digest and repetitive. So that way we never fall off the right path and we just know what to do from day to day to day. But life isn't like that, as we've discussed many, many times. And this is part of the, I guess, part of the challenge of raising children is that while it is important to give them some degree of structure, it is also important to make sure that they don't come to depend on that structure. And that can be really tricky because of course you want to keep your kids safe, but life is risk. And so how do you find that line where that's too much risk, or that's too much, or too little risk, too much safety, right? And it's always just feeling it out as best you can day to day, right? But there are shelves upon shelves of books lined with ideas for how to be a good parent, what to do if this happens. My favorite to this day is 1, 2, 3 Magic. Literally, that is the name of a book. 1, 2, 3 Magic. You know it. 1, 2, and then comes the 3 and the consequence. And so you condition your child to basically fear the number 3. And, and in doing so, you make it so they stop arguing with you. And you can find this book on bookshelves. And what you'll find is a lot of other books that are telling you how to condition your child or how to respond to your child in certain situations, when the answer is, as always, reflect. How much of your frustration is on you just wanting to get somewhere, or for something to happen a certain way, and your child is not on board for that plan? Because your child is reflecting life as a whole, life that is beyond your control. How do you react to that life that is beyond your control? Because that's what you're teaching your child. How to respond to life that is beyond their control.
And how deep that runs too, like with like having a need for like the fucking 1, 2, 3, like that goes so deep into our own sense of need. Like most people, if they didn't think that it made them more valuable, would not have kids. Like, eh, or thinking that they're deriving some value from the number of kids they have, or how they raise their kids, or whatever. Like, because there's that assumption that should have a kid, then there's a lack of there's like then you figure out, oh my god, then you figure out a way to deal with your kid, as opposed to be with your kid because you made a well thought out decision to have a kid that could just as easily have been not having a kid. Like, you were weighing both options and taking in some more considerations, and considerations for the environment, how there's fucking a lot of people on earth. And so it's so funny because, like, once you think that that's going to make you more valuable, or make that assumption, just doing it, kind of like we've talked about before with relationships, just being in a relationship is it. Like, that's, check the box, and now you're more valuable just because you're in a relationship. Like, it's the same goes for kids. Like, just because you have a kid, there's this assumption that you're more valuable, and it's like, oh, good for you. Oh my god, it's almost like with the irresponsibility of not planning. It's like, I've heard even people say that it's oh, that person, there's like almost a stigma that if someone doesn't have a kid, they're irresponsible. And I'm not sure if this is fully fleshed out because it kind of just hit me, but like, I'm pretty sure I've come across people who kind of make that assumption, like, you're not contributing as much to the world. Like, you're not contributing as much to society. You're avoiding responsibility by just living your life for you. But what is the alternative? Living your life, having a kid because you think it makes you more valuable, and then having to deal with the kid, as opposed to understanding it, interacting with it, and then, the 1, 2, 3 shit comes in. And so many of those books are almost skewed, and I haven't read any of them because I'm not a parent, and yeah, not in a situation where I am necessarily going to be anytime soon.
I'm really glad
Um,
to hear that. I just wanted to say there's a deep sense of relief knowing that you are not reading parenting books just in your free time.
I appreciate you spelling that out, because like, if anyone were to assume, like, oh, he can't talk about this because he hasn't read parenting books or whatever, like, wait, he's not reading parenting books? Like, that would be insane. Like that, I would be a fucking more of a psychopath than I am if that was the choice. Like you see me in the bookstore, like going through the parenting section. They're like, "Oh, when are you expecting?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not. Yeah, I'm actually single and kind of chilling and don't have any plans anytime soon." And they like slowly back away from me. They go whisper to someone else like, we got another one. Like people like that's the red flag for crazy psychopaths is like that's like the step one to becoming a fucking serial killer. Like every serial killer has read parenting books in their free time when they're not becoming a parent. Anyway, that was that was fucking funny. It's funny.
And shout
So
out to
anyway,
all our educator fans. We appreciate all of the people who are not parents necessarily, but do read parenting books because they work with young children and whatnot. We certainly don't mean you when we're discussing psychopaths.
thank you for clarifying that again. No, that was certainly not my intention whatsoever. But that's fucking funny. But with that, so anyway, the fucking point I was at before was with so many of those books that you read, I can imagine because I've never read any of them that they're skewed. They can tend to be skewed just because of the example you shared with the 1, 2, 3. I think that's where I'm getting this assumption that so many of them can be skewed towards dealing with kids as opposed to raising them. And even like having a book, just the reality of having a book about parenting, like it's not going to be one page, be sensitive, maintain awareness, don't be too caught up in your own needs, don't think that your kid's driving you more value, which will allow you to pay more attention to your kid, and you know and do your best. And that's just like all it's got, like 5 lines or whatever, because there's not a right way necessarily. I'm not saying that you can't, gain some insights, whatever, from parenting book that or that they're worthless or whatever, but thinking like that's how it's going to go. Because how many things I can only imagine with a parent, because I've done it in other situations, but you think you're ready and then it, pops out and you take it home. You're just like, holy fuck. Like this is live now. This shit is happening. It's not like, that book. Yeah, sure. But like, this is just what's going on right now. And to think that there is a right way to do that is very much reliant upon control and even thinking in your head there's a right way for a kid to, because the kid's its own thing. Like you're not turning your kid into the right thing. It's just being themselves. And so how much push are you going to try and have on it allowing it to be itself? Them allowing themselves it. Yeah, I can say it. It allowing it to be itself. Equally as appropriate.
I know
By
that's
trying to
offensive.
raise it in the right way. Just by trying to raise it in the right way. Yeah. Like how much push do you have on it just being itself?
Well, it's difficult, right? Like, because raising a kid really is like being reborn. Like, if you take it for what it is, you really have no idea what the fuck you're doing. And you can read a lot of books about it. You can read a lot of books about walking through the desert by yourself. That doesn't mean you're ready for it. Right? And so all of a sudden you're in it, and you recognize that this is a human being that is incapable of communicating in the way that you and I have grown accustomed to, with language and clear rational thought. And so it's just experiencing the world. And while there are moments of clarity, there are moments of, I don't want to say being slowed down, but let's just say being a bit more present, where your child has a moment of recognition, like they're here with you. And then they just get caught up in the experience again. And it's such an interesting thing to watch, that they are going in and out of moments of clarity. It's kind of like, they're coming to the present. It's like, hey, how's it going? And they'll have a conversation with you in those moments. And then the rest of the time they're just running around, running around the kitchen or something like that, like just totally lost in whatever fucking thing they're up to, right? And they're not thinking about it at all. They're completely thoughtless. They're completely selfish. They're completely self-absorbed, right? And then all of a sudden they'll come back after a little while to this moment of clarity. And it's so important as a parent to be there for that moment of clarity, which means not to be you yourself metaphorically running around the kitchen screaming, which is what is often happening, because being a parent doesn't make you an adult, right? Being a parent in no way indicates maturity outside of biological maturity. You can have a child, right? It doesn't mean that you are of a mentality where you are responsible enough to know what the fuck that means. And it's certainly not something that we drill home, especially in high school. And I know, because my daughter, God bless her heart, she doesn't have to go to high school, but she has a lot of friends in high school. And they're very wrapped up in the typical, got to be an adult. Adults drink, they smoke, they fuck, they drive. That's what an adult does. As long as I do all those things, I'm an adult. And none of that makes you an adult. And what is an adult? Well, an adult is the same child it always has been, with a more mature grasp on what's happening, a deeper sense of responsibility. The buck stops here, as it were. Right. And so very few people get into parenting with that attitude. They get into parenting thinking, well, there's going to be books and I can hire a nanny and I can just pass it off to my parents. And then the kid's going to go to school and the school's going to teach them how to get a job and the world's going to take care of it. And there's almost no actual connection there for very little. And even when there is time together, if the parent is caught up in their life and their narrative and in where they're going in their own endeavors and their own goals and their own needs, there is no connection to the child. There is just this idea of respect, or rather, obey me. I'm your parent. You should treat me as such. There's no manual that comes with being born that says this person's especially important. Treat them a certain way, regardless if they deserve it or not. That doesn't exist. All right. And so, yeah, parenting really is an act of awareness. Like, if you treat it for what it is, you are introducing another part of yourself to life, to existence. And that means all of life and existence. You can't just keep the kid in rose-colored glasses, and you can't be out there, making him fight in Thunderdome at the age of 6. I just aged myself. If anybody hasn't seen it, Mad Max Thunderdome, check it out. Anyway, the point is that there's a balance, and there's a balance in each and every moment. It's kind of funny, like Celeste, for example. As she was growing up, I was very selective about the movies that I introduced her to, the stories that I introduced her to, the characters I introduced her to, and the villains, because there is this increasing degree of evil that goes with deeper, darker narratives. And that's a lot for somebody who's just come into the world. Right? When my daughter first discovered, I think she was about 9 or 10, that kidnappings actually happen, murders actually happen. These are not just things that are alluded to in storybooks or cartoons, but they actually happen. It crushed her. Like, she just could not believe that this was a real thing. Why would people do that? And that was only one moment that she had like that. There's been others, because of course, each and every time you're revealing more and more of the reality of what we've done with this garden, with this planet, right? And it's so interesting, because the only reason she's had an opportunity to deal with the reality like that is because she has so much time to herself to reflect. I mean, I didn't have a clue. Like, outside of the horror of my own life, I was largely just trying to get by, get through high school, get a job, survive, go to the next task, chase the next carrot, run from the next stick. I never had time to reflect. I was too busy running my ass off trying to survive. And that's the mentality that we're taught in school. I don't just mean survive physically, but I mean survive in terms of keeping up with the herd, keeping up with the expectations, keeping up with the perceptions, keeping up with fitting in, right? That takes up a hell of a lot of our attention. So yeah, we subject our kids to that because largely we're subjected to that ourselves. And so if you can find yourself, if you can find a degree of clarity where you're not operating out of need. You're not operating out of some desire to be more. You're not operating out of anything other than a grounded realization that you are in reality here and now. And that's the most important thing. At that point, maybe consider having a kid. I was lucky enough to actually be at that point when Celeste came along. And so it's been an interesting journey for me, but a lot of people aren't, and it's because we don't take it seriously. We just think it's the next thing to do, right? We get old enough, we get a job, and then we buy a car or release a car, then we buy a house, and then we have, then we meet a partner, and then we have a kid, maybe two kids, and then those kids take care of us when we're old. It's a planned map. It's been around forever. It just does not equal happiness for any of the participants.
Jesus Christ. Like, it's just hitting me how much, like, we've made a whole fucking society that does the same thing. Like, straight up. Like, straight up, Jesus Christ. Like, we've talked about, I've said it multiple times, like, the sort of blueprint of life, grow up, have some fun. By 4, you're fucking in an institution that's going to basically mold you into the most similar thing to everything else that will then plug into a system in the best way when you're fucking 4. And then you get out of that when you're 18 to 22 and you're so unsure. You're like, what the fuck do I do now? Because I've been told every year it's like the same thing over and over and over. Like, I can think back to elementary school. It's like, going through, you get towards the end of summer, you get your class, and you're like, oh, this is my new class. And then you go through the year, you go through classes, you learn some stuff, but not for the sake of learning it, for the sake of doing it. And then you're measured almost immediately based on how well you do that stuff. Like, oh, dude, at 4, 5, 6 years old, getting judged like that. No wonder we're so fucked. Like, no wonder we're so afraid of judgment, no wonder we're so obsessed with looking at ourselves and measuring ourselves. Like, no one, of course. Of course, it's hard to not think about yourself from time to time. Of course, it's not hard to focus on what other people think of you. Like, we get plugged into a situation in which we're constantly concerned about that during our most formative years, where we don't even have the awareness to understand where it comes from, why it's happening. It's just like, so then we have bullies, and we have concern and fear trying to fit in. Immediately there's like groups formed, and it's like this fucking wild Lord of the Flies type situation for like a while, with like one person who's hopefully semi-attentive, who's a quote unquote adult. And a lot of times, like, even them in elementary school, like, are not fully developed. Like, I know some teachers who are like, nah, that's kind of frightening that you're the one in charge. It's like, you barely have any awareness in your own life, and you're in charge, observing these kids, and you're freaked out about judgment and super insecure and super worried about how you're doing in life, and very much afraid of a lot of things. And all of these kids are learning all of these things. And so you have no awareness to be able to point out when a situation, some kid is starting to invest a lot in a certain perception or certainty or judgment or control or whatever. And so, to my original point with how everyone does the same thing. Like, everyone does the same thing, is striving for the same thing. And of course there's variations in hobbies and things like that. And within it, but it's like within a structure, within this realm of, you go through, you get basically, I can't think of the word, like, made into believing, manipulated, that wasn't it, but manipulated into feeling a certain way, brainwashed into throughout your first 20 years. And then you get spit out, and then it's like, all right, well, this is the next thing to do. And it's always just the next thing to do, because it's the same thing. And it's like get a job, start saving money, save a certain amount. There's a right amount. And then, you know, better find a partner before a certain time. And how much of that with women too, they feel more of a biological clock with that sometimes. And like, that's just based on the idea that like of this structure, of this way, like do the same thing everyone else is doing. Cause if there wasn't so much of that, there wouldn't be like people would be living very, very differently. You know, if we were able to more explore just reality as growing up during those years, but there's not control in that because then everyone would end up unique. And then there wouldn't be the ability to even have like, you know, in politics in the US, two main parties. Like to be able to narrow down our thoughts about what's going on to like two basic mentalities that are getting more and more further apart and people are sticking with that. Like, and it's rooted in the same mentality, but the ability, like just thinking about if we didn't have school, then people would be very, very unique in their perceptions of the world and their things. And there would still, of course, be influences, but it wouldn't be from trying to like fit in and fear judgment and measure yourself and all that stuff. So all of those things that we basically carry with us, most people carry with them for their entire life to some degree. And like almost everyone does to some degree because it's so drilled in, you know, that's like 6,000 days straight of just measuring yourself, fearing judgment over and over and over and over again through school. And like, so of course, and yeah, and yeah, I was going somewhere, but yeah, that's enough talking for now.
You know, it's funny because I will be the first to say that the schooling system, and I understand immediately anybody who works in the system is going to feel targeted here. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you at all. I'm talking about the system itself. I mean the way that we're educated, the way that we view the developmental process and what our priorities are. That system is fucked. I mean, it's very much based on kind of like a meat factory, right? You have certain truckfuls of meat, and that meat comes through and it's graded based on the quality of the meat, and then that meat is sent out into the world to do whatever the meat is intended for. But that's essentially it. It's like, oh, here comes package one. Okay, this one's grade A, grade B, grade C, and then they're all, you know, sent out to different restaurants based on the price that people are willing to pay. You could look at the restaurants being employers here. Wow, this is getting dark. Anyway, the point being is that the system of education, as it were, is skewed in what it reinforces within us as human beings and totally ignores about our developmental process, which is that our egotism is something that's kind of built in and necessary when we're children. But if we're not guided out of egotism by mature, rational, aware, responsible adults, society becomes the reinforcement of egotism and judgment. The idea that your value can be measured is egotism. And unfortunately, that is what the schooling system drills into us to a very large degree, because the schooling system is there for a purpose. And many of the teachers will tell you that, well, I'm just here to make sure that you get the best job that you can, that you get the best education, because that's going to ensure that you get the best life. The narrative's there. There's an end result. It's in your best interest. Shut up and do it. Whereas the alternative would be to just provide opportunities for education without the pressure. Let's just say that you do want to be a doctor. That doesn't mean that requirements to be a doctor shouldn't be there. It's just that you shouldn't be taking courses that you would need to take to be a doctor when you have no desire to be a doctor. Makes no sense whatsoever, especially when you're being graded on that course and then you're going to go home feeling like a bag of shit for not performing in something that you have no interest in whatsoever, that has no impact on your life outside of that course in itself. And the judgment of that course and the self-judgment of that course is going to weigh on you for no good fucking reason. So education should be optional. It should be open buildings for education, for the opportunity to learn. You can sign up for curriculums, you can sign up for specific courses, you can sign up for a path to become a certain thing, sure. But it should be on you to decide what you want to learn and why. Right? Again, if you want to be a mechanic, then there are certain things that you must know in order to be a good mechanic. And there are wise people with a lot of experience that are going to help you find that. But if you don't want to be a mechanic, then why are you taking courses that have to do with mechanics? Right? And judging yourself accordingly. Now, again, this all comes down to our own perspective of the world. And the reason I went down this path, in fact, is just because our mentality is ultimately the problem. We want to get somewhere. We want to feel like we're doing something. We want to feel like we're being productive and driving the economy and doing all that stuff. We want to feel like we're in control. And so we parent like we need to be in control. And then our kids pick up that desire for control in the very earliest stages. And as we grow up, as we mature and we start to recognize that, oh, yeah, control is kind of selfish and blind. It ends up hurting other people and never gets me what I want. Maybe I'm going to let that shit go and just settle for influence, settle for being present, settle for the moment, reality as it is. And so then we become parents and we still subject our children to our ongoing commitment to control. It's just diminished from what we were exposed to as by our parents, right? And so that's the cycle. That is potentially the cycle that could be happening all the time, is that commitment to control reduced one generation at a time in the same way that it was increased one generation at a time, which is why it's so important for anybody who is feeling responsible and aware and self-reflective and present and all of that. If you are having a child or you have a child or any of those things, remember, you're making ripples that impact everyone forever. It's not just about your child. And that's something that we forget. We forget about the responsibility of parenting. You're not just helping to raise a child, you're helping to raise a fully active participant in the rest of existence. They're going to make ripples for the rest of their life. What you're doing has a lot of impact in the same way it does when you're coaching, except more so because you are such a big fixture in their life.
Well said. It's like, it's funny. There's like two perspectives almost, or the way I was thinking about it. Like I was initially imagining if we did just like get rid of school point blank, and how much that, like, that would just be such the extreme antithesis of the mechanism of control that there wouldn't, like, if that were the case, then thinking about a bunch of kids just like living their lives, there would be different priorities as they grow up. They wouldn't be so focused on looking around at what everyone else has. Like, there would be massive shifts in their mentality because, and then it would be more authentic to what can I do? And I think people would be, and probably from back years ago, like more jack of all trade type things, like be able to do things themselves in a lot of ways. And then depending on just like of the number of things, maybe someone's a little bit better at this, a little bit better at that. They then focus on that. They have an enthusiasm towards it. And this stuff, because so many of the jobs, like, banking, finance, like, yeah, there's people who like genuinely enjoy numbers and stuff like that. But majority of people, vast majority of people who go into those jobs, it's about the money. It's about looking a certain way. It's about deriving their value from having more stuff, getting more things, doing, being able to look a certain way for everyone else. Because part of the argument may be, if we cut school, like, oh, well, no one's going to want to do these jobs. And then that shifts everything that we do. And so the two perspectives I was thinking about was like, that would be so drastic that like people will have like such a strong aversion to that. But then at the same time, that is happening on a scaled out, like you were saying, generation to generation to generation to generation. And so if you are able to understand that like that extreme thing has the potential to happen, but played out so it almost like make sense to us in a sense, the shifts as and so with that, the understanding that it slowly shifts generation to generation, there's more of a willingness to take that responsibility and realize, oh, this shifts slowly, then maybe I don't need to see the changes, but it shifts with me. Like I am that change slowly playing out. But then if you disregard time, it's like it plays out over given mentalities shifting, but then you just like condense that a bit and it is that extreme jump. It just depends on the point of view that you're taking of that. And if you were to recognize that like that's happening spanned out in a way that makes sense so we can actually interact and given time, even like how fucking time works and we interact with each other and like to get to someone across the room you got to walk, that takes a certain amount of time. So that's then relative to how things play out or kind of reflective of how things play out. There just has to be, not that it has to, I don't really know exactly what I mean by this, but a way for us to make sense of things playing out. And so if you are willing to see that that has the potential to play out, because a lot of people, they'll just think about that and be like, oh, that can't happen. And so they don't take the responsibility because they see it as not capable, because it's like, oh, what, it's gonna change. And then what, society's gonna have to change and we're gonna have to change everything like in the next 10 years, everything's gonna shift. It's like, no, that's how it plays out over time. But if you think that it's either this all or nothing, it changes tomorrow, which we kind of rely upon because we think there's like, we have control and we can plan things, and you start bringing stuff up and people are like, okay, you think that's the best thing? What's your plan? How's it go? How do you do it? Give me your 10-step process to completely shifting fucking reality. It's like, that's not how it goes, because that's a mechanism of control. That's the same fucking mentality. Me assuming that there's a right thing to happen, it's just sensitivity. And we see it playing out. And so someone could say like, oh, well, you don't know that that's what's best. It's like, we know what's going on when we do this. We know how fucking afraid and of judgment and worried about what people think and how often we think about ourselves and measure ourselves. We see suicide rates going up. Like all of these things are right in front of our face. So like we see that as the product of this. So why not try something else? Like why not try a different approach to it? They're like, oh, well, that's too difficult. Well, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to be this shift like one day to the next, but it plays out with you because you can avoid, as I said, you can avoid that responsibility. But if you recognize like, okay, it's not going to play out overnight, but it is playing out. It is playing out to some degree. You can take some responsibility and then do what you can, to the best of your ability, which is not any, like, we're not here saying there's a fucking right way to do that. Certainly. It's just keep paying attention and maybe don't make so many assumptions about yourself or how you're doing relative to other people. And that naturally has a way of changing, reality one generation at a time.
It's really interesting because, and I would like to blame how we're taught history. We don't recognize that the way that we govern ourselves, the system as it is right now, and as it has been, as it's changed over time, has always reflected our priorities, right? Like democracy isn't a new thing, right? But it is something that emerged after people got fucking tired of monarchy, right? People are like, this doesn't work. These people keep getting corrupt and fucking selfish. We need something else. And so our mentality changed. And so our way of governing ourselves changed. But we keep putting the way we govern ourselves first. It's like, well, the world can live in a different way. Yeah, what's the way? Is it communism? Is it socialism? It's like, those are structures. You're not understanding that the structures come from the mentality, right? And so it's the mentality that has to change. It's not difficult to understand. Like it's in the really little things. Like, for example, how many people live in New York? Do you know how many people live in New York City? Like approximately, let's say 4 or 5 million.
No, like 8 million.
Okay, so 8 million people. Can you imagine if every one of those people in one day just picked up one piece of garbage? That'd be 8 million pieces of garbage that were suddenly just removed from New York. Like there is something to be said for collective ripple. And it really just comes down to the change in our priorities. But that's what we don't want to do. You see, that's what you're really encountering when you're talking to people about changing the system. They're like, but I like what I'm doing. I like the way my life is. I like the fact that I can selfishly pursue my own interests and ignore everybody else and feel like I'm in control and define myself and feel like I have more value. I like this because, frankly, I don't know that there's another option. And that's really what it is that they're defending their state of mind. They're not defending the world the way it is. They're defending their state of mind. And that's what the world is our collective state of mind. And so it doesn't take some giant revolution. It takes one person, you, changing your priorities. And as we all change our priorities, the world must change with us. You know, a simple example here would be getting to the point where people stop buying cars because they're the latest, greatest, newest, shiniest thing and start buying cars for their affordability and functionality. Could you imagine the collective ripple in the auto industry? It would change everything, right? Instead of just scrapping old cars, we'd start refurbishing them, actually using them because they're still usable, right? Changing how they work to make them a little bit more environmentally friendly. We can do all of that, but instead we're just creating more cars, churning out more and more and more. Oh, the latest model. Here's the advertising. Here's the way it's going to make your dick bigger. Like, we do it all the time. And it's just for the sake of driving the economy, making more money, giving more investors more fucking dividends, and making sure that everybody feels fucking rich and in control. And we don't recognize that it's just a fucking giant machine that will never end, and it doesn't need to continue to run at this fucking size or speed. It can be enough to make sure that we're all living comfortably and that we have time to actually recognize why that's enough. But instead, we're running ragged for priorities that mean nothing. But until we realize they mean nothing, that they don't actually work, that they're never going to give us the peace and happiness and fulfillment that we're so desperately hoping they will, you know, that until that point, nothing changes, because that's what this society is. Manifest destiny, right, is the foundational belief that underpins the entire North American society, basically, and now everywhere. Like, you see it everywhere. I was one thing going to France. I was just looking at the McDonald's, looking at the various different, chains that I've seen everywhere else. And if they weren't the exact chains, they were pretty much carbon copies, right? And it's all the same engine in the pursuit of more. Right? So it's very interesting. But yeah, going back to it, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Same thing, computers. I don't buy new computers. I will buy an old computer and I will refurbish the fuck out of that thing. All right. Why would I buy a new computer? Because frankly, while it might be slightly more powerful, I know that more than likely it's also designed to fail faster. All right, because they want me to buy another one. And they want me to buy another one. And so it's learning how to use the things that you have. It's learning how to appreciate what's in front of you. This is something that was true, especially like 100 years ago. Everybody knew how to repair their furniture. People knew how to like darn their own socks. People knew how to make the most out of what they had. They didn't just go and get a new pair of socks. They didn't just go and get a new pair of pants. Right. And we just don't do that. And so the world's just like, hey, sweet, you're willing to just throw shit out and buy another one. Here's another one. Right. And so we take advantage of that. And it all comes back down to our mentality. It really does. It's not the system. We want to blame the system, but it's our mentality. The schooling system's exactly the same. Like, we want to blame the schooling system, but we put it there. We agreed to keep it there. We went through it and then afterwards put our kids through it. Right? So, I mean, it's not the system's fault. It's just that it's expedient. All of these things are expedient. They're quick solutions, to the problem of dissatisfaction with reality.
Oh man, it's insane. Like some of these examples you're bringing up are just wild. Like cars have always made me laugh for a while. There was a bit of time where I was certainly like, "Oh yeah, that makes it more valuable for sure." But it's so like a fucking sign on the front of it. Like that means something. Oh my god. And so how much I liked that you brought up the mentality versus the product of the mentality, because I think that that's such a it's all of it. Like, it's the whole, like, these are not things that we plug in. It's not like we look through what's available and we're like, this one looks best. It comes from us. We're pointing to the thing. You're pointing here. Like, they're all products of us. But if you don't want to recognize that, and if you want to think like, oh, it's too much, everything you guys say, you really think that's gonna change? You really think that can shift? And it's not about it shifting. Like, it's not about us changing it. It's about shifting ourselves. It's about not being so focused on getting the next thing and getting the next, like, oh my God, with the cars, with the electronics, it's like, I know people who fucking every year they get all the latest gadgets just to have them. And like, some of them are like techie people and they're interested in the new features, but it's like, that's another thing, is as you mentioned, they get more and more shorter lifetimes, basically, literally designed to fail. And like, we know that. Like, we're aware that they're designed to do that. That's insane in and of itself. Like, right there, that thing that they're designed to fail, they're not designed to last. That's
But we'll buy them.
insane in and of themselves, in and of itself. And so with someone who is doing it for like the new features, it's like, with that, we see less and less and less new features with every device. It used to be, a bunch of things shifted, 10, 15 years ago with the phones. Even then, it wasn't shifting that much, but it's still a decent amount of features changed. Like, there was at least 5, 10 things. Now it's basically the camera is like 1 megapixel better. And like, that's it. It's like one thing. And the new one with Apple was like titanium. It's now made out of titanium, which is like a tiny bit lighter or something. But we even see the shifts in that. We see, like, with size, with people want really, really small phones. I remember when I first got cell phone was I don't know, like 2009 maybe. It was all about like smaller phones. There was like a tiny phone that flipped around, and that was like really cool to have the smallest phone possible. And then over time it shifts to having a bigger phone and a bigger screen and more space, but then it's like, and then it'll shift back again. So we think of those things as like, oh, bigger screen as the best thing, but then 10 years later it could be smaller thing or smaller screen. Like, that's then the update. And so it's not even like these objective things, it's just something new and different that, because of then the advertising that you mentioned, we're able to make a message out of it. Like, the advertising is curated to the new thing to be like, this is why. And so it's not even thinking for yourself. It's someone telling you this is why it's better, which 10 years later, maybe someone telling you why literally the opposite is better. Or people going to less clear pictures, using older cameras because they like more of the authentic feel. But then on the other side, it's like, trying to get clearer and clearer pictures, closer and closer to looking like reality. And so much of that just stems from thinking that it means something about us, which is only ever able to be maintained in our head, in our assumptions about ourselves, where our value lies. Like, you like value again, like, oh my God, like, value is not a thing you can measure, obviously. And so, but like, all of this control and things that you buy and things that you have and like brand shit is all made up bullshit in our heads. Like, we're literally living in a world, in an imaginary, made up, measured world that we're so goddamn afraid of, because of, and like, it all circles around the same core stuff that comes from you moment to moment, which is like, takes responsibility, but it's also incredible. Like, it's fucking beautiful. It just depends how you want to look at it and how invested you are in one side, or the other, which again, I say invested in one side or the other. It's not like this thing like you're either invested in this or invested in that. It changes moment to moment, which is the other beautiful thing. Like as much as you can get lost in yourself very quickly, you can also stop doing that quickly and shift very quickly in the other sense, because you're not in one camp or the other. You're not, you know, you don't have to stay in a mentality you've been in. It's like it shifts with you moment to moment, and it may fluctuate up and down throughout the day a bunch of times, which is incredibly incredible to hear, because then it's like right now, whatever you're doing, like you can shift that a little bit. Like you have influence over that experience, as we started out, like talking about earlier, like when you're feeling a certain way, like you have the power not to control how you feel, but to respond to it, or maybe not think there's something so wrong with it, or not fight it so much. And that immediately changes it. Like that's cool.
Yeah, the question of value is something that's kind of funny, especially when it comes to like electronics, because people, and again, it's an exercise in how much control we have. Like I need to have the crispest, picture. I need to have the finest black lines, that kind of thing, and I need to have the most memory and all of this shit. And it's like, yeah, okay, so the newest thing has the most value, right? Yep. All right, cool. So they buy the newest thing. Next year, all of a sudden, that thing's no longer valuable because there's a new thing. So how valuable was it to begin with? Right? So it never comes down to the fact that it's more valuable because it's new. The value comes from functionality. Like the reason that I use the computer that I have and I haven't, upgraded it for years is because frankly, I don't need to. It's got a solid graphics card. It's got, all the things that it needs to do the work that I need to do. And that's it. It's functional. There's nothing about it that's like, oh, and it's not even pretty because I mean, the side of it's open. I built half of it, right? It's not pretty whatsoever. It's not to show people. It's because it's functional and I need it for my life. But that's the difference in priority. It changes everything. And before Edward Bernays and the using of Freud's research into the ego, into the wanting to be more in advertising, that's what advertising was this will last you 20 years. It wasn't this will make you look sexier. It was about functionality. Our mentality was different. And by catering to our ego, to our desire to be more, they changed the nature of our buying habits. Right? They change the nature of our priority. But it's up to us to change our priority back. Right? And that really just comes down to recognizing, why are you prioritizing things that will never lead you to be more than you are? Right? Even if you think that you're going to lead people to perceive you as more than you are, that's not the case. Right? It'll never change what you actually are, regardless of how you're perceived. And that's what changes our priority. And that's what changes society, is you being aware and responsible and being the source of your fulfillment in all of the little moments of each and every day. And the world comes to a grinding halt around you because that shit is infectious. This has been a hell of an episode. A lot of fun. We're going to continue on in 15 minutes on Patreon. It's a tier 1 call today, which means it's only $5 a month if you would like to join us. If you're not sure about the monthly fee, do check out the 7-day free trial. That means you can actually join any of the 5 groups that we do each and every week. We like chatting with everyone. So if you can join us, we appreciate it. We also appreciate the support. As I've mentioned previously, we do not cater to shitty advertisers. We do not cater to gambling and religion and politics and all that shit. We don't want that shit on our podcast whatsoever, but that unfortunately does limit us in terms of revenue, which keeps us alive. So your support means a hell of a lot to us. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew. Andrew, this has been a fucking rad conversation. I, again, went into it going, I got nothing to say.
I went into it feeling like literally the same way. I was like, I always kind of feel like this, but today I feel extra like this, which is I was like, all right, well, let's smoke a bunch of weed and see what happens. And that's dope. And yeah, we're over time now, so I'm gonna stop. Yeah, join us on Patreon in 14 minutes. It's gonna be a blast.